2, 1, action.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order the September 1st business meeting of the Croton-Harmon Board of Education. And please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we will start off with the approval of the agenda. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second. On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. We will now move into my president's report. So good evening, everyone. Thank you to those of us who are joining us in person and via live stream. I hope all of our families, students, and staff had a wonderful, restful summer and a great first day of school today. I wanted to take a moment to welcome again our new staff members who had just departed. Prior to the start of this meeting, we were able to meet the newest members of the Croton-Harmon team, and on behalf of the board, we are so happy that you've joined us. Earlier this week, I had the honor of welcoming our staff back to the 2022-2023 school year. And I talked briefly about the exciting initiatives taking place in our district. From the facilities plan, which you'll hear more about tonight, to the evolving work of our strategic plan, to the district's guiding questions that we discussed at our August 18th meeting. I'm sure I speak for many of us when I say that I'm excited to be a part of this work, and I look forward to sharing our progress throughout the coming school year. With so many things going on in the district, we hope that our families will be able to join us for back-to-school nights at each of the schools to learn more about this work, the school, and your children's classes and their teachers. At Pdc, Back-to-School Nights for grades 5 and 6 will take place on September 8th, and for grades 7 and 8, it will be on September 13th. At CET, Back-to-School Nights will take place on September 20th for grades 3 and 4, September 22nd for grades 1 and 2, and the kindergarten night will be on September 29th. And lastly, the Croton-Harmon High School Back-to-School Night will be on September 28th. And thank you. That concludes my president's report. We will now open hearing of the public. So speakers may use the podium to address the board on school district matters. And we ask that you state your name, and you can provide your email or address on the sign-up sheet provided. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes. So if we have anyone who would like to speak. All right, then we will move on, and I will turn it over to Superintendent Walker for our superintendent's report.
Thank you, Sarah, and good evening again, everyone. We'll call this the Superintendent's Report Back to School Edition. And wanted to begin. There we go. And actually, I wanted to take a moment just to give Greg again kudos for regularly and so expertly putting together these reports. We make the information that I share always look so great. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Several, of course, significant events occurred in preparation for the start of school for our Tiger students today. And I wanted to take a moment just to highlight some of those and the people who made those such wonderful events for everyone who was involved. Starting recently with our new teacher academy, as Sarah mentioned, the board just had an opportunity to spend some time with most of the members of our new faculty. Their selections come as a result of some outstanding recruitment, interview process, and real genuine, thoughtful consideration by our building leaders, directors, district office administrators, and then consideration by the Board of Education. So I want to thank everyone who's involved in the selection process of those outstanding folks. And their onboarding process kind of begins in earnest with our new teacher academy. And this year, those were 2 full days led and facilitated by John in such a terrific, warm and welcoming way in collaboration with Jared Blair, really designed to be the first 2 days of what will now be a multi-year experience for our new faculty together with goals that include making sure that they feel connected to each other as a cohort, as a new team in our district, that they feel connections to us as leaders within the system, and that they feel connected to the community as a whole. And so you'll see there, they got a chance to spend some time off campus, enjoying one of the many things that makes Croton such a beautiful place to live and to learn, as well as a full bus tour of the district. We thank Neil for addressing the new faculty as well as their mentors, CTA leaders, and administrators at lunch on the first day. And it was just a privilege to get a chance to be in the room with them as they started their careers here and get a chance to know that they're going to be impacting our system for years and years in the future. So we're thrilled to welcome all of them again, and thank you to John for his leadership in putting together that experience. As Sarah referenced, we also had a chance to welcome back everybody, all members of the faculty and staff earlier this week. And our message really was fundamentally about recentering around the concepts of joy and passion and interest after 3 years of what were tremendous and at times felt like overwhelming challenges for all of us. That this is a year that I think begins perhaps as much as any in our history with a sense of optimism and hope and joy, and all of those things present wonderful opportunities for us as a system. And so it was a real privilege to be there this morning and that morning and to get a chance to share some moments of joy from my life during the summer, some genuinely joyful and some more just embarrassing. But it was a really great series of moments that morning to get a chance to be there with them. Also, of course, wanted to make reference to what has become hopefully a point of conversation around various parts of the community, and that's the updating of our district's logo, our district's branding. I know that this was a priority of the Board of Education's Communications Committee for some time, and John, along with Greg, and the board's Communications Committee and the Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES communications professionals collaborated beautifully to envision and now communicate a new branding, a new visual approach to how we message our vision and our future focus as a district. And so you see there that the interlocking circular shapes representing the strong and cohesive community that we benefit from on such a regular basis, and have such a genuine, supportive, and collaborative relationship with and such pride in. And the swoosh or the swish heading toward the star, of course, talking about the future focused, future driven philosophy that we look to bring to our work, as well as we think better aligning the overall color scheme with that of our athletics program and having some consistency across the district in terms of how we present ourselves. So we're incredibly proud of the work that went into that and into the product. Had a chance to visit some local businesses earlier today, and several folks said, unprompted, hey, we love the new logo. And that was really nice to hear. I know nice for John to hear as well. So thank you to everyone who was involved in that. And for all board members, thanks again to John. You have the new logo represented on the sticker there in front of you somewhere. So if you want to put that on your laptop, cell phone, wherever you'd like to put it. Thanks again to everyone involved in that. We also had a chance yesterday to bring together for the first time in person all of the members of the strategic planning core team, consisting of about 35 stakeholders, invested folks from across the community, led in person by Dr. Judy Wilson, just to kind of give us an orientation to and an overview to the process, the why, our role in it, and begin to set the stage for the significant parts of the work that begin on September 21st and 22nd. Also in person for full days, where we'll be beginning that work of reviewing all of the data that was provided through the evidence that was provided through our surveys and conversations, as well as review of some of the quantitative information that will inform what happens next for our systems. That was a really nice way to end the second conference day in a way that primes us for the forward-thinking work that we'll continue to be doing as we start the school year. And I was saying to someone earlier, I wish that folks in every line of work had the chance to experience in their work the kind of anticipation and joy and genuine happiness that is the opening of school, the first day of school. And there was something, frankly, just incredibly emotional about today in all three of our schools to watch kids and families, faculty and staff come back together in such a beautiful way. There was music, there were bubbles, there were breakfast, there were hugs, there were tears. It was everything you'd want in a full day. It was just a beautiful, beautiful day from CET and the outstanding work by Carrie, Craig, our PTA in preparing for the arrival of our kindergartners and their families. Thank you to Anna and to Neil for addressing those families during the day-to-day. To PVC and welcoming the incoming fifth graders. We had an incoming first day fifth grader parent tell us earlier that her son came home saying today was the best day of my life. Does it get any better than that? So thank you to Michael and Nicole and the entire team there for just a wonderful first day. And John, nice job with the selfie of the district office team there very early this morning. Students were arriving. As well as the high school, the big buddy breakfast, the welcoming of our incoming ninth grade students. A wonderful job by Laura, by Mark, by Erica, by the entire team there. I genuinely don't know how a first day could have gone any better across the school district than it did for everyone in our system today. Thanks to so many people, including the Board of Education, for your support and leadership in welcoming everyone back. And so shifting gears to another incredibly exciting aspect of the work that's been happening for several weeks and months, including in earnest over the past few weeks of the summer. We wanted to provide the board with an overview of what the future facilities planning team has been engaged in. And thanks to Walt and Sarah, of course, from KG&D for joining us again here tonight. So the future facilities planning team met again, I guess Tuesday evening, right? And so we wanted to get a chance to share with the board and with the community some of the work that occurred that evening. And even prior to Tuesday, some of the most recent work that occurred in the 3 weeks or so in between those meetings of the future facilities planning team, with a timeline as aggressive as this one is. We really want to make sure that we stay focused and stay on track with this work. And Denise has done such a phenomenal job of keeping the team's momentum going, keeping us focused. And the team themselves has been incredibly focused on the work, and it's shown. And I think you'll be very proud of what you see tonight in terms of an overview, leading up to the board's work session on the 15th, where we hope that most, if not all, of the future facilities planning team will be here to share with you a detailed dive into where the project stands. But I'm happy to turn it over to my colleague who's going to talk a little bit about some of the work that was done from the financial aspect and as well as the secret aspect of it. Denise?
All right, thanks, Steve. So it's been a busy few months for the future facilities planning team. We've reviewed the buildings, met with administrators, the building condition survey. We've done several walkthroughs, and a few weeks ago we gave the team some homework. So we provided them with the Miro board tool, which is a design tool that shows an outlay of each of the components of the projects and buildings, and it allows you to drag your priority wishes to each area of the board. And then there was a budget planning tool, which allowed, we gave them priorities as far as 30 million, 35 million, and 40 million. If you had these goals, what would your wish list be? And some people chose to do one and not the other. Some people did both, but surprisingly, there was consensus between the two when we compared them. So their priorities were identified, and Superintendent Walker will share a little bit more about that later on in the slide. Based on those priorities, we looked at our projections for the financial scope of the project, and I'll share about that in the next slide. Also, we prepared the secret documents. So before taking on a capital project, you need to determine the environmental impact and scope of that project. So we have been preparing the documents with KG&D and our attorneys. We also did an archaeological study that was recommended by Vice President Haber based on some previous projects. And we received a report today that there is no further study required, that nothing of value or substantial impact was identified. So that was really good news to get today. And I've also included that with the secret documents. We have also conducted an RFP for construction management services. So construction manager will come on at this point, do some cost verification, project planning, etc. So we are interviewing 3 firms that were selected this Wednesday. And I will report more on that in our next session. So the financial overview. So the state has created state building aid to incentivize districts to continue to keep and maintain their buildings. Here in Croton Harmon, our state aid ratio for building aid is about 42.7%. So we receive about 43 cents on every dollar for eligible capital project expenses. Ideally, if strategically aligned and planned, you can align declining debt with new construction. So the red box on the right side of that screen shows the declining debt and our ability to utilize that declining debt to bring on this capital project at a tax neutral status. So it's leveraging our state building aid with our declining debt service. So to achieve tax neutrality, we first need to determine the scope of the project. After the committee came together, we identified items that were top priority. At that point, we took each component of the project and determined what the expected aid ratio would be on that project. Then we took all of the components and we had to actually put them in a building because each building has a maximum cost allowance for construction and incidentals. So we took all of those components, put them in, and then also looked at the maximum cost allowance for that. Generally, the incidentals, which are site work, administration, any asbestos abatement, and so forth, the incidental cost allowance is generally what puts districts over the maximum cost allowance. So after comparing each of the buildings and those numbers, we came out with a figure that we feel comfortable moving forward with. And Superintendent Walker, I'm going to give you that pleasure.
This is really phenomenal news, folks, to think about that with the infusion, the use of $2.5 million in our capital reserves based on the proposed scope that Denise talked about and that we'll describe in some further detail. We project to be able to support a project of $45.5 million with no tax impact, meaning tax neutrality for our community. When we think about being able to say to the community the scope of a project at that size, the effect that can have on our students, our faculty, our staff, teaching and learning, athletics, the arts, infrastructure, and community use of our buildings for decades into the future at a figure like that can be tax neutral. That is amazing and wonderful news for us to consider. And what an amazing opportunity we have to think about that and to envision that as the future of our system. And so as we worked through the process that Denise described in terms of reviewing what the Miro board and Excel spreadsheet feedback was from the future facilities planning team, after discussion with the team on Tuesday night, these are the proposed enhancements to our physical plant that impact all aspects of the experience for students, faculty, staff, and the community that have wide-ranging support and consensus from the team. And there's obviously a lot to take in there. There's a lot to feel great about. So I'll stop talking for a moment and allow the board to review that and begin to process and envision that.
I just think that we should add through the work of our architect and our assistant superintendent for business. We were able to achieve that 45.5 million because we were able to, I think probably should have, negotiate or convince state education department that the items that you see on at say Spencer Field are not simply allocated to the nearest school, CET, but are apportioned among all three schools. So that if it had been just CET, then we'd be in a situation where we would be way over the maximum cost allowance for CET and would not be able to reach anywhere near the number that we have been, I guess, approved for. So I will say, as one of the board representatives on the team, kudos to our staff, to our architects, and to being able to convince SED to look at it in that way.
I'll just say that when I received the information from Walter, we were just leaving our administrative retreat, and we had to compile all of this information very quickly. And Steve and I spoke to the principals. We started a shared document. We got it to SED immediately. They didn't actually have the opportunity to review it then, but we received a letter from them last week indicating that they had approved that we could apportion Spencer throughout the three buildings. And that really just increased the level substantially. So we're really thankful. Thank you, Walter and Sarah, for your work on that.
I just want to take a minute and acknowledge our athletic director, DJ Goldman, who
He's hiding in the back.
who has provided, the passion regarding upgrading our athletic facilities and also helping us in understanding what our student athletes need with respect to that and participating in all the future facilities planning team meetings, as well as everyone else. Thank you, DJ, for that.
Come to the board meeting, you get a shower, it's great. Very well deserved, very well deserved.
I just have a couple questions. Is site access, is that accessibility to the field? Is that what that means?
Yeah. Can speak here. Yeah, that
Yeah.
microphone.
Yeah.
So the site access is improving the pathway and road access from basically the area of the maintenance building to the field itself. It's obviously a challenging slope. It's really a great place to watch and do any activity on the field. But we do want to improve it so that it's a little easier to navigate, both for pedestrians, folks with disability, and also get some lights there. So the part of the discussion is to make the walkway visibly safer, because you'll see the proposal potentially includes lighting the field. And we know that that happens for homecoming events with generators, but if we're going to think about evening activities there, we also want to get some lights on the walkway.
So is the expectation that it will be easier to get to the field and that accessible?
That's the
for all?
expectation. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then the changing room bathrooms, is that on the Spencer piece too? I just know that was on the table. Is that
So
included there?
two separate items,
Okay.
just in terms of the discussion of the programmatic requirements.
Mhm.
There is a master plan concept that we put together that includes every desirable feature that could be added to the athletic complex. One of the identified needs was a field house building, which included team changing rooms, storage facilities, and departmental space for trainers and potentially coaches. That is not currently included in this scope of work, but what is included is a concession stand with the restrooms. So there will be restroom facilities, but not dedicated team changing rooms.
Okay. Can that be used also when there's like thunder or
That's
like
it.
when they can, it's the intent? Yeah, okay. Great, thank you.
I'll let Omar know. Thank you.
I just want to add one clarification about a question about thunder. So there will be hopefully some covering associated with the concession stand, but it's not intended to be large enough to house the capacity of the bleachers. So the capacity of the bleachers will be increased.
Yep.
Which hopefully will be a lot of people.
Yeah.
But the canopy won't be as big as.
I was thinking more actually just when the teams are practicing,
Yes, I
that
think
they can go there even if there's a threat of, thunder or lightning and have a safe place. to go.
that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah,
If there was a large event with a full house,
Right.
it's certainly not going to fit under it.
Okay, great, thanks for the clarification.
So for the public, full disclosure, I'm a board representative on the future facilities planning team. And we were given a preview of this presentation last night. I was very visibly disappointed that the tennis courts did not make all of these enhancements for our district. Denise, you just mentioned that the archaeologists had done a skip. Was it included the space that would have been included in the tennis courts? So do we benefit from having that knowledge now if there is
Absolutely.
funding later to do that work?
So what we did is we did the entire potential scope of the project for the secret resolution.
Okay.
So that should construction costs change, we accelerate the project, should money become available, that we have that within the scope and approved to consider.
Wonderful.
If I could just point out, one of the things that we discussed at our last meeting.
Which last meeting?
of
So
the
many
team.
common committees.
Of the team, was the fact that the tennis courts didn't make the cut, but that there might be other ways to meet those needs. Either potentially, if all of this comes in under budget, or other ways, fundraising, et cetera.
You okay, Walt?
I took my breath away.
It's something that was said during the meeting, but the tennis courts, the cost, at least has.
1.2 million.
Was 1.2 million, including maintenance and repairs to the existing courts, 3 new tennis courts, and a tennis pavilion. So in thinking about some of the things that we may in future years, and obviously there'll be inflation, be able to do with capital reserves that we're able to do with other fundraising. It's certainly not off the table, even though it might not, at least from my perspective, even though it might not be able to be accomplished as part of this bond proposal. And I think would probably, be done, or could be done sooner rather than later.
I like the way you think, Neil. This is how I justify buying things on sale.
And incidentally, because of the low aid ratio for tennis
Yes.
courts, it's an ideal project for capital reserves.
Wonderful.
Omar first and then Josh.
So I had a question about the total project cost. 45.5 million, does that include in there state aid?
Yeah, so that 45 million is what the district would borrow to fund the project. The state aid that offsets that and the declining debt is what make it tax neutral for the district.
So, and how long did anybody look into how long this borrowing would take effect? Is it a 30-year, 10-year?
Yeah, so about 15 years, that's what we projected. And also what this allows is that, and I believe it's about 2026 or 27, there is also another drop off. So what it allows is for future tax neutral projects. So in other words, it doesn't cap us for the next 15 years. It fills in the debt for the next few years, and then there's another drop off, which would allow
So this-
for another capital project
Exactly.
at tax neutral
Just wanted to
status.
make sure that. Thank you.
You said 2027, Denise?
I believe so, yes. I can bring it up in a second.
I think Josh.
Oh, Josh.
Yes, so looking at the stack of most of these items are pretty clear to me what they are. I wondered, and I think are pretty clear to the public. I wondered if you could expand a little bit on what the Innovation Learning Center and STEAM Center renovations at CHHS are.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect segue into talking about the work session on the 15th. And that's when we'll have the entire team here. We'll be able to produce some visuals of what those things may look like. And Dr. Duback will be here to talk about how she envisions that to roll out, Josh. All right, and really for all of those, if we could, those kind of details we'll look to provide to the board. We'd be happy to do it, of course, on the 15th.
My question was similar to kind of detail some of the aspects here, so I'll wait to the 15th, but I guess one other question that probably can be answered now, is the air conditioning situation, addition in the kindergarten wing at CET, would that make the whole building fully equipped with AC? Or are there still
There's
areas?
still other areas.
All classroom spaces with the air conditioning.
Classroom, okay,
And actually, we're going to talk about air conditioning in a few slides as well.
got it. And then maybe this is also for a future, maybe for the future work session, but I'm just interested in kind of how this is all timed to like, would most of these spaces that are being outlined be completely out of use or availability for use while it's all going on, or is it staged? I'm just trying to get a sense of how the actual renovations happen and how much disruption there is to the community.
It's a good question, and obviously there's a lot on the plate here. And it will require a very detailed evaluation of a phasing schedule. The simple answer is it depends on the area of work. Certain areas of work will take longer than others. The goal obviously would be to complete as much work as possible during the summer. But the summer construction period is limited, and there are pieces of this project that will take longer than the summer. So that will be a detailed effort, and obviously the plan will be to cause as little disruption as possible to normal school activities.
Is there a projected end date at this point or not? Like, is it a 1 year, 2 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have it on my tongue. But I think you're looking at multiple years, 2 to 3 years for construction. I'm sorry, construction sequencing in summers.
Steve, maybe for the 15th, if you can also outline, so this is the scope of work that is anticipated to be performed in this phase of funding. What is left to be done? Sure. It'll just be helpful to understand what's remaining.
Yeah,
What fell below the line?
yeah, and the team had significant conversations about those topics as well. Absolutely. If I could, one of the things that I know the board has seen before that we've talked about, and the future facilities planning team has, I think, centered a lot of the thinking around, is the concept that we want this project to engage multiple areas of the student experience and the needs of the facilities. Right? And so we've used this graphic previously to depict that. So we're looking for a balance in the sense of that term between infrastructure improvements, teaching and learning enhancements within the space, those enhancements that impact the athletic program and our student athletes, as well as those that enhance the experience for our students who are involved in the arts. And so to display how these enhancements are reflected in that sort of a context and our work to achieve balance, here's a different way of looking at that, with the green representing those that we believe are improvements to the athletics experience, teaching and learning, the arts, and infrastructure. And so that's a way that we use to represent, to ensure that we were filling these buckets in a robust way and not any sort of an imbalance, in our opinion, in terms of trying to make sure that we meet all of those important points for the project. And that's the anticipated total tax neutral cost as we sit here today on September 1st, 2022. And so let's talk about air conditioning a bit, because obviously that topic was a part of discussion of the future facilities planning team and has been for some time. And so if we looked at a project or a cost to address all air conditioning needs in spaces, essentially at PDC in the high school, with most of CET being air conditioned now, in addition to the air conditioning list that you're seeing on that screen, we'd be talking about an additional between $12 to $15 million. So essentially a substantial increase in the project, or reducing about a third of the project in order to provide air conditioning. In addition to that, as we look at it, and Walt can speak to this in greater detail, to do that kind of expansive air conditioning work would mean replacing systems that are midlife or not end of life as they exist now. And so we'll be dealing with inefficiency from a financial standpoint and operational standpoint. What we love about this project from an air conditioning perspective is that it moves us incrementally toward where we would like to be in the future, but does it in a responsible and efficient way, in that in those spaces, as you see laid out there, because of the scope of the work that's anticipated, we'd be able to replace or install systems that would allow for air conditioning within the cafeteria, multipurpose room at CET, the kindergarten room wing at CET. You'll see the spaces at PVC, as well as the music suite, innovative learning center, and cafeteria at the high school. So certainly making some strong steps in the area of air conditioning without being financially, we think, putting us in a financially difficult situation or having to reduce the scope of the project from the student experience standpoint. Walt, did you want to add anything to that?
He sums it up beautifully. The big issue is there are a lot of systems in the building that are very complicated, and there are varying ages. So different parts of the building have different vintages of systems, and many of them are in good operating order. Don't forget, this project includes all the very, very exciting stuff we talked about in June, which is the must-do infrastructure work. So we're replacing pieces that are aging out, and as we do that, and as we look at potential renovations, the plan is to incrementally over time position the facilities to move away from fossil fuels. So looking at high efficiency heat pump systems, and doing that in a way that makes sense. It gets your money's worth, so to speak, out of the investments you've already made, and then at the appropriate time converts them over to high efficiency heat pump, which will then lend itself to air conditioning. Probably all know heat pump systems as like a Mitsubishi split or something that would be in your house. It can provide a little bit of heating and cooling. That's the type of system we're talking about, but just at a large institutional scale.
Is there a space at CET for, in the future, for a central chiller plant? In the entire building?
I don't know that we looked at that specifically, Paul, but
We don't have space now that would, unless you got, I guess, if you got rid of your boiler room, I guess, maybe.
yeah. I can tell you one thing we did look at was the potential for a geothermal system, potential future geothermal system. And the well fields are rather sizable, but as Paul said, the equipment inside the building would then take the place of your boiler plant, your fossil fuel boilers, and put a high efficiency ground source heat pump system in, which can provide the backbone for heating and cooling.
You said that was over 200 wells that we would have to drill.
It depends on the building.
Yeah.
You know, it's the each building has a different heating and cooling load, but that would basically be more or less underneath the upper field in terms of footprint, maybe 3/4 of the field.
When you say the upper field, you're talking about the baseball field here, because you had talked about.
Sorry,
high school.
at CET.
At CET,
Yeah, CET.
the upper field at CET, and then a lot, basically the baseball field, perhaps, I think you had said,
Yes.
some parking lots at the high school, and middle school complex. But I think just, well, you did say they are inert, which means,
Yeah, it's typical to install well fields underneath playing fields, parking lots, and even buildings. It's a grouted in place, solid grouted pipe that goes into the ground. It's a plastic pipe with welded joints. For its purposes, they just live there in perpetuity. All of the mechanical equipment usually lies within the building, and there's no reason to ever access the well. Even if a well had a quote unquote failure and a pipe broke, it's in a grouted core, basically. So the well, you can't get into access. You really just turn that well off and put a new one in. So they can be located under parking lot, play
So-
fields.
thinking about what's been proposed and thinking about this idea. If we are talking about not creating a turf field at the upper field at CT, which is one of the proposals, didn't make the cut.
Mhm.
Right, that would allow in the future, before a turf field is put there, if we ever do, to drill the wells that are made. Similarly for the baseball field here, I think it would be much more difficult, correct me if I'm wrong, to put a turf field down and then decide, oh, I'm going to start digging wells through the field.
Absolutely. Field would have to come up, for
Right.
lack of a better term. I will just caveat, the whole discussion about geothermal is that warrants a deep dive. It's a very expensive proposition. Has a long-term payback, but in an institutional building, it does make long-term sense. But the initial capital investment to do that is significant, and it should come at the right time when thinking about massive replacements like boiler plants, which is a little bit down the road.
Thank you for clarifying that, Walden. Actually, I think that's a great segue into the conversation around health, wellness, and sustainability, and that lens as it relates to this project. So similar to the overall scope and to air conditioning, it's we're not able to do everything that we would like to do and plan to do in the future related to these topics, but there are a number of areas that the team identified that address concepts, important concepts around health, wellness, and sustainability, including, of course, the replacement of older mechanical systems with higher efficiency solutions. Makes a great deal of sense. Increased use and orientation around outdoor learning spaces as reflected in investments of both CET and PVC for that kind of purpose. Abatement of materials, improved ventilation systems, enhanced infrastructure to support continued electrification of our school bus fleet. The concept that installation of new roofing systems allows for additional and further solar arrays in the future and water bottle filling stations. So we feel very good about the sustainability aspects that are involved in the proposed project as well. Huh?
I just want to, I want to piggyback on what you're saying yesterday in our meeting. It was, I think, Patrick DeLascio and Joe Barolaro who also kind of expressed how this benefits the community as a whole, how it benefits, ASO, who are also going to be using these fields. The district would always have priority with respect to that, but it benefits our community as a whole, which I think is, significant because we are a community too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. In terms of next steps as the team envisions it, early in September, continuing the work to refine some of the cost figures, as well as starting to consider some of the furniture costs that would be associated with the project, which we know will be potentially significant. On Thursday, the 15th, 2 weeks from now, as explained, we plan to provide a detailed deep dive into this, all aspects of it to the board with many members of the team there to be present and to participate in that. Mid-September then, assuming that the board feels good about what you have heard tonight and here on the 15th, our focus as a team, as a future facilities planning team, would shift from conversations around what's in the project to conversations around how do we best communicate over the next 3 months the scope and value of this project to our community. We want to continue along our proposed timeline then on the 20th of October, that the board would have the resolution to consider on that agenda that evening for the community referendum, with continued plans to have the vote occur on December 13th. So we feel, I have to tell you, I feel fantastic about where this is and the possibilities, the opportunities that this is going to provide for decades and decades in terms of affecting the experience that community members, students, faculty, and staff have in our schools. This is an opportunity that doesn't come along often. So I encourage us to continue to think closely about this and the potential that it has. Thank you to the board for your consideration, Denise for her leadership, Walton, Sarah for your expertise, and the entire future facilities planning team.
Does anyone have any other further questions? Well, then we will.
That's my report.
And to echo what Superintendent Walker said, thank you to everyone who's been a part of this. I know it's been a lot of work. So to the whole future facilities planning team, thank you so much for your dedication and work on this project. Thank you, Walt and Sarah, and DJ and Paul, and especially Denise. So, we will now move on to our student ex officio report. So I would like to turn it over to Molly Levitt.
Hi, so this is my first report as a new ex officio member of the Board of Education. I'm really excited. I'm really grateful to be here. Today was the first day of school, so there isn't too much new ground to cover. So I'll just be going over So, so Mr. Walker touched on some of this earlier, but today the freshmen were welcomed into the high school, and I was actually one of the big buddies who was helping welcome them in, so I had the privilege of getting to school at 7:50 and not 10 a.m. The other non-freshmen, but yeah, we had the bagel breakfast, and we were able to show the freshmen around the school. They were able to get used to the new surroundings, and we were able to help them find their classes before the rest of the students got here. I remember doing that as a freshman, and it really helped me out, so I'm glad that we can keep doing that now. And we had our first chap of the year. We had our first school-wide assembly of the year. It was really nice to have the whole school in the auditorium together, and I think we took that for granted before COVID. It's good. This year the school clearly wants kids to be more engaged. Well, technology has its benefits in schools, only in moderation, and so they are trying to make sure that kids aren't on their phones, because during COVID, they became much more commonplace and kids were used to having them a lot. So they're going to have to be a bit stricter with the phones going forward, just to get back to that sense of normalcy. But I will say, my last normal, quote unquote, experience, my last normal first day of school was 3 years ago when I was a freshman. And what I feel, and from what I've been hearing from my peers and from teachers, is that this has felt like the most normal that it has in years. And people are really looking forward to it, and so am I.
Thank you very much, Molly. We will now move into new business. First up, 3.1, our secret resolution. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the following secret resolution declaring intention to serve as lead agency as presented.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, motion carries. Now move into 3.2, district goals / essential questions. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the guiding questions for the 2022 district goals as presented. You will recall these are what we discussed at the August 18th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
On the question?
I have a comment, a couple comments, just for consideration for admin and also the board. I've been reflecting since the last meeting when these were presented as district goals that the language really matters. And I support these essential guiding questions. I think they serve as worthy pursuits for the 22-23 school year, and I definitely think we should move forward with them. But as you stated last meeting, Mr. Walker, these essential questions are intentionally aspirational and intentionally questions rather than statements, which is not what a goal is supposed to be. And I don't think it's in the best interest of our students, faculty, staff, parents, or the taxpaying community to move away from what we know of the word goal to mean. Whether you follow the SMART goal methodology or not, goals are usually specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And so these essential questions, in my opinion, do not satisfy that criteria. I propose that we approve these as guiding essential questions, which is how they've been referred to in the video that was sent out to the community and in the meeting last time. But that we remove any reference to the word goal before we approve them. I propose that we continue to pursue answers to these thoughtful questions and implement programs to support the findings throughout the 22-23 school year. Then I think concurrently, the district and the board should collaboratively create district goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound, as stated in the intent of the January 22 goal setting plans presentation. Ideally, I believe considering one of the goals to be related to pandemic learning loss. So I wanted to open that up to see if there's any comments before we move forward with the vote.
Does anyone have any comments with
I
regard
mean,
to?
I would just ask that Superintendent Walker go over what Vice Principal Nicole's kind of thinking was and the reasoning for making these open-ended questions, because I thought that was compelling during our last work session.
Sure, yeah, so I think one of the things that we're trying to do is to create or further a culture that's one of what we would use the term psychological safety around the idea of risk-taking on behalf of continuing to advance the experience of our students. And that is where innovation comes, that's where creativity comes. You have to create an environment where people feel, I think particularly after the 2.5 or 3 years of experience that everyone across the system has had in the COVID environment, where we have as professionals an ability to feel as though there are opportunities now for us to say what we have continually done has had wonderful results. But as we think about the future, I think there's an understanding broadly that we need to continue to think about our practices in ways that focus on refinement, enhancement, and what students will need a year from now, 3 years from now, and 5 years from now. So when you look at what particularly businesses and private sector does related to some of this work is, and I certainly understand the approach of SMART goals, but in terms of creating a culture of innovation and creativity, what we feel is that the pursuit of answers to these questions, and interestingly, I've had several great conversations with faculty members already saying, here's a thoughtful risk that I attempted today in my classroom, Steve, or here's some work that we're engaged in that we think is directly aligned to the concept of an answer to this question. And even if there's failure associated with some of those attempts, we still get better as a system because we try. And there's advantage and benefit in the effort. And so I think that we're best positioned at this point in time to frame our work around the pursuit of answers to big, interesting, and galvanizing questions, rather than kind of the adherence to a strict accountability model that comes from some other ways to look at this.
But you
Yeah,
see
certainly
this-
we haven't used the term, I don't use the term goals necessarily, and
Right.
haven't.
Mhm.
They aren't goals in that way, right? The goal is to improve the system broadly, if you want to look at it through that perspective. But I think we're best positioned to do that through the pursuit of answers to these questions.
Right, and I just want to add to that I agree. I think that these questions are a good essential guiding questions and would provide those things you said, but could they exist along with more specific goals that clarify for the community, what the objectives are, specific to what's being measured. And so we can see, to Josh's point last time, we need to know when we've achieved a goal, right? When we've
Right.
met.
So if I could remind the board, one of the things that we talked about was the operationalization of those, right? The more SMART goal related structure comes from those that I create, that will be sharing with the public, that the principals and department or building leaders create, that then operationalize the aspirational guiding questions as we discussed earlier that the board's considering now. So I think it covers all of the bases through that kind of a structure.
Except the board doesn't collaborate on those, right? Or
Correct. No,
review
those
or
are created
approve
by
them.
the administration.
It's now the beginning of I think it's the 10th year on the board. So I've been through, this is, I think, the 10th district goal setting that I have sat through, possibly the 11th, because I think it might have been in the room when the previous one was done. And if I had to see another one that was done the way that we've done them before, I think I would have cried. Because it was the same kind of platitudinous SMART goal that you have, that every business does and every organization does. Well, we're going to increase this by that percent. We're going to do this other thing by this other percent. We're going to do that. And the end result is, yeah, you show some incremental improvement. And yeah, you get to chalk up at the end of the year. You say, yeah, we did that. Yeah, we did that. it's not aspirational. That, I see, to me, those are not goals. Those are just milestones. Those are sort of somewhat, they're the how. They're not the what. This is more about the what, which is, asking the tough questions, and out of that comes specific milestones. I don't think we can do that. In this day and age, the challenges before us are greater than fit within yet another round of basic goal setting. We need to think bigger.
Could there be a place for both though? Again, I
But I
think these are good
Not at the-
questions, but I think they could be also goals, district goals, right?
So if I could happen, I do think that there's a place for both. And I think that place is at the superintendent level and the building level, where those aspirational questions are then operationalized. And I think, what we discussed on the 18th was putting spots in place, like, scheduling and looking at our annual work session calendars, so that we are coming in and we're discussing each of those questions. We're taking one of those questions and we're looking at it. We're looking at how they are operationalized, what things are going on in the buildings, and how some of those goals are being met. So I think we do get both there. And I understand that it's not something that the board is approving on those individual sort of operational goals. at the
Or
building level.
collaborating on.
But I think there is inherent collaboration there, because those are work sessions. Those are things that we are learning about. If there are things that we have questions about or we have concerns about, that's, we have ample opportunity to discuss those with the building leaders. So I think there is that collaboration there, to my thinking.
I mean, the anchor for these questions being goals for me is that it's the pursuit of answering these questions that are the district's goals, to quote Superintendent Walker. And I remember the work session where we talked about how these questions actually allow every member of our district to enter at any point. And I felt like that was to encompass every member of our district, regardless of their tenure here, their experience here, or their position here. I think really just takes us to the next level. I keep talking about how we're a great school district. We keep talking about how we want to be an excellent school district. And it's these nuances that I think allow for that kind of risk to be taken, for people to voice their opinions or their passions, or to vocalize their concerns or their what they can contribute to the district. So I am actually in favor of these questions. And it was a process for me to get here. But I think that as a goal, pursuit of answering these questions is really important.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with what Hannah said. I'm also thinking of some of the reaction that I've heard from staff, and probably that we would hear from the community, which is, I'm not looking as a staff member, I'm not looking to use that term, check off boxes or make sure that I've done. I am looking for the ability, and if you will, the freedom to think that I'm going to be part of a system, as staff, that values me and gives me the opportunity to try things, because the ultimate objective, we all agree. And I think parents and other community members, as they realize what's going on, as they reflect on it, and as they see what's happening in the classrooms, will embrace that as well. And yes, it's a different way of doing things. And yes, I grew up with the idea of SMART goals, because before that, and maybe this is, when Josh was on the board or before, our goals were even so amorphous that nobody even measured them. We will have the ability not to measure success, but we will have the ability to collaboratively discuss our success. And, kind of a former superintendent of our district said, it all comes back to policy. Well, this is not policy, but what it strikes me is somewhat analogous. Our discussions are going to be what we want to accomplish. And then we are going to the administration and saying, okay, how are you going to do it? What are your objectives, your specific objectives, your SMART goals to show that you've moved towards that? And so if I look at that kind of in an analogous situation to say, this is good for getting everybody involved. And if we endorse the concept, we don't need to know that there were 3 sessions with Judy Wilson or 5 times that that the curriculum coordinators got together so that they met those goals of moving towards a future-driven district. We let them loose, if you will, with our oversight to be the professionals that they are.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, yeah, that these aspirational questions were really giving the school administration the latitude to try new things and different things, and report back on a regular basis, right, with what their findings are. I mean, I'm all for aspirational goals, and I think everybody's heart and mind is in the right place. And I'm sure we'll have ample opportunity to kind of touch base throughout the course of the year and find out what's going on and how these themes translate operationally into concrete actions. I mean, because as you were talking, I had my own questions. I wasn't here at the last session, but what I didn't see here were, what about technology? What data elements are we going to take to measure these? But I think that's what Steve is saying. He'll go back to the team with the building leaders and say, okay, well, how do we, again, future-driven school systems, for example, right? And report back in a way that, at least I'm hoping that that's the case, right? That it'll, how can we further, whatever it is, curriculum, pedagogy, whatever, and report back to us as a board, because our responsibility is to ensure that these goals ultimately get met. And I think part of your concern is it's hard to do that when they're so ambiguous.
Absolutely, and if that's in the operational goals, then, I look forward to seeing those in terms of a measurable, achievable sense.
Yeah, I think and we talked about this on the 18th. For me, at a 30,000 foot level, one of the first things that we would look at to say, are these questions galvanizing activity in the buildings, is when we come as a team in front of the board and the public at work sessions, we're able to say, in response to this question, here's the work that's occurring throughout the system. Here are the initiatives, programs, plans, thoughtful risks that are taking place in classrooms, in our schools. And here's what we believe success to look like. Here's what progress looks like as a result of these questions and the activity, the thinking that's happening within the system. If we're not in a position at a work session to come in front of this team and say, here's what the guiding question has led to in terms of activity in the building, then we've realized either the question isn't right or there's something about our response to it that hasn't worked. But to me, first and foremost, it's, do these questions galvanize activity and different thinking? And I think based on what we've heard, as Neil referred to earlier, as what we've heard from faculty and staff, even at a first glance at this, it already is. So we're honestly, I'm excited about the chance over the next few months to be in front of this team with the administrative leaders talking about how we are operationalizing these things.
Right, and I just want to highlight that I do think these questions do provide that, and I'm in support of those questions. I do think that, to your point, galvanizing activity towards what, right, should be part of the discussion. So what does that success look like? You said, specifying what that activity should lead to and making sure that that is what has been led to. I think that's part of our responsibility as a board to make sure it's happening. So
Yeah,
thank you.
We look forward to those discussions. We're gonna have
Okay.
fun.
And I want to add one other thing about that. It will make us much more involved in discussions about education. Sometimes over the years, the board's been kind of, well, they do that and we hear about it maybe, once or twice a year. But we'll have, I hope, a lot of discussions and be able to dig deeply into what's going on and what we're hearing from the community as to what parents believe has been successful in motivating and encouraging and exciting their students, their children, and what's the interplay between students and staff. So I look forward to lots of discussions.
Thank you. Any other questions? All in favor? Aye. Oppose, abstain, motion carries. We'll move into 3.3, agreement for services for IT technology. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the agreement for services amendment between Croton Harmon Union Free School District and EduTech for on-site information technology services during the 2022-2023 school year as presented.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, motion carries. Now we'll move into 3.4, a resolution rejecting proposals for security officer services. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves the resolution to reject the proposals for security officers services and issue a new request for proposal RFP as presented.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? Anna?
If you could just kind of explain for the benefit of the public, this is not SROs. This is, can you just go over like what this actually entails and why yeah.
Sure, so we contract with a security firm for security at the high school. We have 2 guards that alternate during the day. We like to issue RFPs every 3 to 5 years for those services. In developing the RFP, there was some conflicting language that generated responses that were also conflicting because of the language in the document. So right now, last week, or actually Monday, we have a temporary kind of stopgap measure for our security aides with the same company. And then at this point, we are speaking with BOCES, who's also doing an RFP that we could piggyback on, or we will reissue the RFP, but we wanted to formally reject those bids. But we are not releasing those services or not retaining those personnel.
Thank you for the explanation. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, motion carries. We'll now move into donations. Recommended action that the Board of Education gratefully accepts a donation in the amount of $300 from Eric Kohler and New York Life as a contribution to the Carrie E. Tompkins Elementary School General Fund.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, motion carries. Recommended action that the Board of Education gratefully accepts a donation of $500 from Joyce Hammond and Jeffrey Carney as a contribution to the Flex program at Croton Harmon High School.
So moved.
Second.
Omar?
That was me. Yes.
On the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, motion carries. All right, we'd like to take a moment to just thank our donors for your generous support of our school district. We appreciate that you think of our schools and our students. We'll now move into the consent agenda. Recommended action that the Board of Education approves all items under the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
On the question?
Hold on.
I might, I'd just like to thank the administration and our building leaders on finding all of the staff and teachers that we needed in the midst of this
Yes.
incredible teacher and staff shortage. Because I know that this summer was a scramble, especially the month of August, so good work.
Thank you on behalf of the team.
All set? All right. All in favor? Oppose, abstain, motion carries. We are now moving into the closing of the meeting. So we have our second hearing of public. We don't have any public who would like to speak, so I will move on. And we will now move into board reports. So we will start off with advocacy. Mary, would you want to take it away?
There's not been any activities since.
We had our initial meeting.
We had our initial meeting.
Yep. I think since, yeah, we hadn't met before our last meeting. So, last meeting.
Oh, that's nice.
Well, and I think we can say that we do have another meeting scheduled.
Yep, we have another meeting scheduled. We just got did everyone get from NISBA the
Yes.
resolutions book? Okay,
I do.
so, yes, today,
Yeah.
yeah. So we'll, at our next meeting, be going over that. And be prepared to bring those recommendations to the board.
I just will add, I guess, as an advocacy, although I was going to do this in Poland, as the individual who is going to be tabbed to be the voting delegate. I will note that the two resolutions that the board approved for submission to NISBA have both been supported by the resolutions committee. They are resolutions number 21 and 22. Just to be clear, what happened was when we submitted our resolution, they said, you know what, you're really asking two different things. Why don't you split them in two parts? We said, fine, it's done. They support that. There are 43 resolutions between those that are supported by the resolutions committee and those that are not. So that means there's a lot of work for advocacy committee and also a lot that everybody might want to read. And if you have any thoughts about anything that you've read, I think let us know so that we can think about it and be able to report on that day. And I think it's fair to say that at the October meeting, when we discuss these, to give direction to me as the voting delegate, our plan and what we've done in the past is only bring forth for board discussion those items where we think either we're not sure what we should do or they're relatively controversial and we want board input. So we're not going to sit in this room in a month and go through 43 different items. You're welcome.
I wish you all well. As a former member of the advocacy committee and no longer a member of that committee. Godspeed.
All right, so board development, we also had our first meeting. We will be meeting with Neil next week to discuss the conversation that we had had at the 18th regarding board goals. We put together board goals to bring to the board. So that's kind of where we are with that. Communications.
We're meeting on Wednesday.
Yeah, wonderful. That was policy.
Policy, we are meeting 1 week from today, on the 8th.
Great. And has the audit committee did not have
It
you met?
hasn't convened. The meeting has been scheduled for October 6th.
Wonderful. All right then. So quick board reports this month, but I'm sure we will all have exciting things to report back next month. Business meeting. We'll now move into polling of the board. Anybody have anything for polling?
Oh, I did have a question.
Yeah.
When are the state assessments, the math and the ELA going to be the results, the outcomes going to be released to the district?
If they are not on the parent portal now, they should be on very, very soon.
Spring assessments are on the parent portal.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I thought they, yeah.
They weren't as of a few days ago, but.
Yes, last night I looked,
Mhm.
I mean, just because.
And that's the state test.
Yeah.
The state, yeah, I think I saw them in the backpack.
They're in the
yeah, it's in the
backpack, yeah.
backpack.
And you
is-
actually have to
Yeah, they would be
acknowledge
in the
that.
backpack, yes.
Is the spring star exams also up there?
They should be.
Yeah.
What we can do is I can have Jared really do an update on the parent portal
Okay,
and let the board know tomorrow.
okay, great, thanks.
Does anyone else have anything for polling?
Josh.
Josh.
I do. It is a related topic, which is annual report.
Mhm.
I think we usually do that in the October, November timeframe.
We've normally
We
done it
moved
in the
to
October,
We
but
used to do it in October. We moved it to January the last several years.
yeah.
We did it October last year.
Did we do it in October?
Well, we did a review, the.
Oh, okay, you're
Yeah,
right.
then we
did
had a
review.
longer
Yeah, you're right,
discussion
yes.
later.
Is that planned
Um,
for October this year?
Uh,
I believe the October 20th meeting is going to be devoted
Yeah.
to finalization of the
Facilities.
facilities plan.
Mhm.
So
right.
that's probably, that may involve no discussion because we're all really happy. Or it may involve a lot of
That's the
discussion
goal, yeah.
and, that may take up that whole.
Yeah, I would. I do not construe this as me rushing it, saying we should do it sooner. But obviously, the review of scores and stuff like that is all part of the annual report. And because that's how we can, sort of compare things across the whole district, and we've got everything for all the grade levels. I look forward to it, and every year I have things I see in it that I think I wish we would do a little bit differently. But it has consistently been improving year over year in terms of the organization of the thing and the information that we receive. So, I kind of look forward to the next installment.
So at our next agenda planning, we can look over the calendar for the upcoming work sessions and get that on the calendar. And then what I would ask in terms of if there are things that you would like to see a little bit different, or things that you feel are not in the annual report that might be worth considering, if you could send those to board officers so that we can share them with administration ahead of time, and not like the week before the meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be.
And if you could consider doing some kind of review, whether it's the whole annual report or not, in the fall timeframe, especially for all those assessments that were done last year. It will be almost a year if we wait till January.
Mary, I think, I presume that your concern, as you mentioned before, pandemic learning loss
Yeah, and
so-
progress.
and progress. So I think it makes a lot of sense for us to know that sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
also to then think about, while we're being very future driven, as we've talked about, and aspirational, that we are confident that don't have students who are kind of left at the wayside, and we need to be concerned about. And I'm sure that, our staff are, but the data is what informs.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said.
My biggest concern in this is that the testing conditions, the assessment conditions during the past 2 years may not be comparable with pre and post COVID assessment conditions.
Well, let's take a look.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's worth seeing, obviously. I think we may actually work, especially when it comes to state tests, many of which were suspended. I think that, during in the year before, I think we may get more interesting data out of tools like Renaissance and Renaissance Star and other local assessments, which are
Yeah.
conducted more often. Now we will.
Well, that
out
should
of,
be included.
Out of the state, that's, these are all interesting things, so I don't think we should, as Sarah suggested, let's filter that all back up to the board officers
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
so they can be included.
As part of this discussion, I kind of want to channel Dr. Blair right now and just kind of talk about how it's not just about scores and how the resounding comments that I got from staff and faculty and even my own children were, there was a prevalent theme of joy in the district today. And there's no, test score that can convey that. I think everybody was happy to be back. And while I think that's important, I love the fact that everybody started off happy today.
Yeah, I think there's a place for all of that.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yep. So yeah, if you could just, any thoughts or considerations
Send you a request.
versus last year's annual report, just send them along to me on that. In terms of anything else for polling, I was not able to attend the West Butt advocacy meeting. I'll make sure I have the next one on the calendar and let everybody know about that. But I will debrief with the advocacy chair and get some updates for what went on there. So I'll bring that to our next advocacy meeting.
And just to touch upon the board development
Yep.
that we had done, if anybody has any ideas regarding retreats.
Yep, so we will be looking at retreats. We're trying to establish when we need to look at timing, and then also facilitators for that. So
Sarah
be
and
on the lookout
Yeah.
from probably we'll ask Tracy to send out a doodle, but
Yeah.
we'll be on the lookout for that in terms of a fall retreat date so that we can get that on the calendar.
Sarah and I briefly touched upon maybe doing something related to finance and the finances of the school board and the district as a whole, just because we have so many financial components at play right now. But if anyone else has any other topics that they would like, please reach out to Sarah.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
myself. We'd appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Since I've never been to a tree, are they essentially, there's trainings and what other kinds of?
You have to bring an appetizer that reflects your personality.
Not every time.
Or no, other times they have exercises like you get 3 strands of spaghetti and you have to build a bridge
Yeah.
that goes 100 feet,
Got it.
which I
I
couldn't do.
I would tell you
I
to aim
failed.
low with somebody who aimed high and revealed too much
I-
on the
yeah,
first opportunity.
Thanks for the advice.
Bring some lessons.
But they are generally trainings, they're outside facilitators, there's lots of sharing, we
Great.
sing kumbaya before we break.
Love it.
Typically related to the role of the board.
Okay.
All right, anything else for polling? All right, so we will then move on to items needed for the next Board of Education meeting. So as we've all discussed, the next board meeting will be the September work session, where we will be hearing from the future facilities planning team and hearing more about this fantastic project. So any questions that you have that came to you tonight based on sort of the initial review, please send them along again to board officers as quickly as possible so that we can share them with administration so that they can frame those into the discussion on the 15th. Okay, all right. And I think that is all. So with that, recommended action that the Board of Education adjourns the meeting at 8:58 p.m.
So move.
Second.
I'm sorry, who,
Theo moved
Theo
and
moved.
Omar seconded.
thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. All right, thank you very much, everyone.
Should we not have had a